at the cafe today where Keith and I met for our meeting. I mean, it was good, but it is why it was extra tiring. I think was because it was, people were having other conversations, and you got the cutlery clanking and banging, and that really makes it extra difficult to concentrate on your conversation and what your thinking processes really.
To be honest with you, Chris, the acoustics are rubbish in there, and it was fairly quiet today. There was quite a few empty tables. When it's packed, it's awful in there to hear.
Mm, mm. But there we are. We chose to go there, I suppose, and so we know what it's going to be like, and so I suppose we should. Can't go with earplugs, otherwise you can't hear what each other are saying.
No, that's true.
Perhaps we should use telekinesis.
Oh, blimey, that's
a big
that's
word,
a bit
isn't
next
it?
level.
Yeah, and a big word, telekinesis. I'm glad I remembered that one. Yeah.
Well, so Chris has basically already called us to order by bringing up the very topic that I wanted to ask you about. In terms of having conversations, what makes it easier or harder for you to have a conversation, and what kind of things can you put in place to mitigate that?
Well, we've been in a funny world the last 2 years, haven't we? One of the advantages of being on Zoom and things, you can put people on mute. You can just go, and you can, and if they're being a bit noisy or speaking over each other, then that's been a big advantage, because if you don't, then the slightest noise, a dog barking in the background, it just takes your concentration away. But so that's been one of the advantages, which of course you can't do in the real world unless you've got a big piece of gaffer tape. But you can't do that. So that's been one of the advantages. And of course, it's always fun to go, you're on mute, when they forget they're on mute. So that's a good little game you can play. But that's one of the advantages. It helps you then concentrate on what's going on, really.
So if you weren't on Zoom, would you try and sort of make sure you were in a fairly quiet environment so that you've just got the one thing to focus on?
Yeah, I definitely would. I do these days. I do need a quiet environment around me. And funny enough, Keith's wife asked me the other day. We were at another event at the hospital, and I said about it, and she said, so you find it very difficult when there's a lot of noise and things going on? I said, yes. And I could see the next question in her mind was, well, but you play in brass bands, surely that's noisy and there's lots of things going on. But the difference is you're all in harmony with each other, aren't you? And you're not at discord, whereas ordinary conversations that go on are discordious. Blokes, when they talk, they generally have a kind of a game of tennis. They say their bit, then the other guy says their bit, and they just bounce the conversation between each other. Noisy conversations I find very difficult. How about you, Keith?
Yeah, I was just thinking, I think it depends sometimes upon the context of the conversation. If it's just two people conversing, that's generally quite easy. When you're in a group, it's more problematic. And the old "I want to speak" cards, are really helpful, because I find it terribly easy to jump in, and terribly hard not to at times. And that's quite alien for me, because I never ever used to be like that, chairing meetings at school, or I used to chair big education meetings and used to participate in them. Never ever would that thought come into my mind.
So Keith, do you think that's because now you have a thought that goes into your mind, and you feel, well, I've got to get it out there, otherwise, you can write it down, but it
just while you were talking, Chris, I was scribbling some notes. You probably can't see them, but I was scribbling notes just while you were talking, because obviously I wanted to hear what you were saying, and you were prompting some thoughts in my mind, which was great. But also there were other thoughts in my mind that were racing around. So I was noting stuff down. And even if I see a friend, sometimes, particularly on Zoom, and I maybe haven't seen that friend for some time, and often it might be a former student, say, and we might be doing a catch up on Facebook Messenger video, I've prepared 5 or 6 notes that I really want to talk to that friend about, because I'm fearful at the end of it we'll stop talking. I think, oh goodness me, why didn't I mention that? I really wanted to talk to her about that book that I'm reading, or this piece of work I'm doing, or I wanted to ask her or him what he's been doing, how his course is going or whatever. So there's an element of almost pre-rehearsing as well. I do quite a bit of pre-rehearsing in conversations. I'm thinking things through all the time. My mind is racing.
I envy you the ability to make notes as you're talking. I used to be able to do that, obviously, as a police officer. Then, well, that's what I was doing, was making it. But I now can't do that. I've either got to, if I'm making the notes, then I'm not hearing, and if I'm not making notes, then I totally agree with you. If I don't make a note, then it's gone by, and then sometimes you can bring the conversation back to where you want it, so you can put your bit in, and other times the moment's gone, hasn't it? And so, I mean, I tend to use an awful lot of humor, and unless I can get my joke in there at the right moment, if I make the joke 2 minutes later, what's he talking about now? Where's he going? So that I do find that now difficult, that I can't do both those things. But no, it's a good idea if you can make the notes.
And also, Kathy, I like to ask people questions while I'm talking to them.
Yeah.
So that can sometimes steer a conversation or a discussion if it's a more formal piece of dialogue, if you like. And it is dialogue. I don't like monologue. And it's terribly easy to fall into monologue mode when you've got dementia. And many of us have come across people who do that. We all do it to varying degrees. And that can be quite, what's the word for it? Disconnecting to the conversation, because you lose the plot. You lose, they're going off on one, let's say, and then you lose your own focus because of that.
Yeah, we're back to Chris's tennis game, that you sort of need the other person to bat the ball back to give you that purpose again, to keep it flowing.
Sometimes when you're sitting down with a psychologist or psychiatrist, you say your bit, and they just look at you like that, and it makes you say something more. And so you kind of feel, hang on, I think I've said what I want to say.
Yeah. You see, you and I have got a very dear friend, Chris, but sometimes he will go on a bit, and then I lose the plot, and I sometimes think, God, why did I ask him that? Because I've lost the essence of what he wants to tell me, and then I get frustrated because I'm not engaging with him in the way I want to engage.
What do you do if people, for not to be malicious, but they sort of start to push your voice out of the conversation? Like, how can you bring it back?
As a teacher, I sometimes feel I'm treated like a gobby child. The teacher, who's the facilitator of the meeting, wants to ensure everybody gets a fair go, which I 100% agree with. But then sometimes you feel that you're shouted down or you're ignored because you've already said something. That really hurts me, because I think back to me being a teacher, and I'd never do that to a kid. Because if you think you've got, let's say, a bright child in the class, or a child who's enthusiastic or wants to contribute, we have so many 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds who are alienated from education because of this very reason, that teachers have not nurtured that enthusiasm. And I can think of a number of people in the dementia world who fall into that trap so often, sometimes for the right for not the right reasons, it's not the right, sometimes for what they see as the right reasons, but to the exclusion of maybe someone who's got something useful to contribute.
You're dead right, Keith. It is quite hurtful to be shut down so quickly. And if if you've got a lot of knowledge about a subject, and you're able to speak from personal experience, and you've got a lot of knowledge, and you only manage to get one sentence out, and you get told, well, let somebody else have. Sometimes you think, well, okay, well, that's that then. You won't, I'll seal
do it
my
again.
lips shut. I won't do it again, and I'll be quiet. I mean, sometimes, I mean, you are dead right. We can use the cards, and sometimes I do remind people, particularly on Zoom, saying, look, can you put your card up if you want to speak? The only drawback with that, of course, is if you're the fourth one that's put your card up, and by the time you get to speak your bit, it kind of, the subject's maybe drifted in a completely different direction because the previous three have led it away.
When you talking there, prompted two thoughts that I just wrote down as well. One was the word respect. And in a conversation or in a meeting or in any kind of exchange between two people or more people, there needs to be that respect. Even if you don't agree with the person, and even if you don't like the person, then if you lose the respect, then you've lost a lot. And the linked into that, I think, is relationship as well, because I can think of some people in some of the groups I go to who I'm not that keen on, but actually I sense that there is a relationship between us, a friendship almost, or they feel a friendship towards me that perhaps I don't reciprocate back, or conversely I might have it towards them and they might not show it back to me. So that's a factor, I think, in any kind of exchange with other people.